Emily Hawthorne was the kind of woman who found peace in routines. At 32, she lived a life of balanced teaching yoga during the week, managing a wine tasting room on weekends, and jogging every morning through the quiet trails of Napa Valley. Her life was calm, predictable, enviable, even on the morning of October 4, 2023. She did what she always did, laced up her turquoise running shoes, slipped on her lightweight hoodie, and told her fiancé Mark that she'd be back in 45 minutes. She never was. The fog that morning hung low like a veil over the valley, casting the trails in an eerie bluish haze. Emily's usual route wove through the trees behind their property, dense with redwoods, moss-covered boulders, and the occasional vineyard fence line. Locals called it the silent stretch, a place where you could jog for miles and never see another soul. Emily liked it that way, but that day, something was different. A neighbor walking their dog later reported hearing something faint like a cry or a call for help, but thought it might have been an echo, or even a bird. By 7 a.m., the sun had fully risen, burning through some of the fog. Mark looked at the clock, made coffee, and checked his phone. No messages. When 8 a.m. came and went with no sign of Emily, unease began to creep in. He drove the loop she usually ran, calling out her name, expecting to find her tying a shoe, taking a water break, anything. But there was no sign. Just trees, morning dew, and silence. When he returned home, heart racing, he called 911. Search and rescue arrived quickly. Within hours, dozens of volunteers and sheriff's deputies were combing through the trails. Helicopters buzzed overhead while dogs sniffed out potential leads. They found fresh footprints believed to be Emily's, but they abruptly stopped at a fork in the path. Nearby, tangled in underbrush, lay her phone. The screen was cracked, the casing dented. Strangely, there were no fingerprints except hers, and no blood or signs of a struggle. It was like the earth had swallowed her whole. Her family and friends were baffled. Emily was experienced on those trails, knew every turn, and never ventured off course. She had no enemies, no known stalkers, and no history of mental health issues. For days, the local news ran constant coverage. The sheriff's office issued alerts and even offered a reward. But as time passed, hope dimmed. What began as a search transformed into a mystery and, soon, a haunting void in the heart of Napa Valley. The moment the 911 call went through, the Napa County Sheriff's Department treated Emily's disappearance as high priority. She wasn't the type to vanish without warning. Deputies arrived at the trailhead by mid-morning and began piecing together her last known movements. What began as a missing persons report quickly escalated to a full-scale search operation. Local rangers closed off the trail loop, while helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned from above. Even neighboring counties sent in K-9 units and drones. But by sunset, not a single trace of her path beyond the broken phone had been found. The phone itself added more questions than answers. It was discovered 200 feet off the main path, half buried in mud near a narrow slope. The screen was cracked but intact, and the health app showed her heart rate spiked sharply at 6:19 a.m. before going flat. No gradual decrease, no indication of a fall. The last step recorded was mid-stride. Investigators examined the device and found no calls, texts, or GPS deviations. Oddly, the battery was nearly drained despite being fully charged that morning. No fingerprints but Emily's were present, and the case was snapped at the edges as if crushed by force. As hours turned into days, hundreds of volunteers poured into the area to help with the search. Neighbors, co-workers, even wine tourists, who had seen the missing posters that quickly went up across Napa Valley. Some hiked for hours through thick brush and steep ridges, driven by the belief that Emily might have gotten injured or disoriented. Yet there were no torn clothes, no shoe prints beyond that sudden stop. A nearby vineyard owner offered use of his ATV to search behind the property line. What they found instead was an untouched forest, pristine, almost unnaturally quiet. Media outlets descended on the scene by day 3. News vans lined the entrance to the trailhead. Reporters speculated about wild animal attacks, abduction, even cult activity. Experts weighed in, each theory more chilling than the last. Mountain lion prints were found, but they were old and headed in the opposite direction. One local hunter said the area was cleaner than it should have been, suggesting someone may have tampered with the scene. Still, there were no drag marks, no signs of blood, and no hint of Emily's clothing or personal effects. It was as if she had stepped into the trees and disappeared between one breath and the next. By the end of the first week, exhaustion set in. The search teams had combed 17 square miles. The sheriff's department held a press conference and announced they were exploring all possibilities. Mark, Emily's fiancé, made a tearful plea to the public, urging anyone with information, the smallest detail, to come forward. But no tips led anywhere. No one reported seeing a suspicious vehicle. No camera footage captured her after 6:02 a.m. and the trail cam near the ranger station. It had mysteriously stopped recording that morning at exactly 5 hours 59 minutes and 57 seconds, just 3 seconds before she would have passed by. As the search for Emily Hawthorne shifted from rescue to recovery, a vacuum of certainty opened onto the town of Napa, began filling it with speculation. People who had never met Emily whispered theories over coffee and at vineyard tables, each more sinister than the last. Some believed she had staged her own disappearance, though those who knew her insisted she had no reason to run. Others murmured about a secret relationship, a second life, or even witness protection. But no money had moved, no passport was used, and her social media accounts remained untouched, suspended in digital silence. One of the earliest and most alarming theories came from an old trail hiker named Russ McKinney, who claimed he saw a man standing near the second-mile marker around 6:15 a.m., the day Emily vanished. He described him as tall, pale, wearing dark sweats and no reflective gear, just watching the trees. Russ said he thought it odd but not threatening until the news broke. The description was passed to police, who created a vague composite sketch, but no one stepped forward to identify the figure. Even worse, the sketch seemed to resemble someone else, a transient man previously seen camping deep in the woods nearby, but when deputies searched the area, his camp was gone. Then came the re-examination of Emily's personal life. Investigators dug deep into her background, questioning friends, co-workers, and especially her fiancé Mark. Their relationship had appeared stable, loving, but a co-worker quietly mentioned a recent argument they'd had, something about Emily being watched, feeling like someone was following her during her morning jogs. Mark denied this conversation ever happened, though texts recovered from Emily's phone days before she disappeared hinted otherwise. Saw him again today. I know, it sounds crazy, but I don't feel safe anymore. The recipient of that message was listed only as M, but it wasn't Mark. As public interest swelled, amateur sleuths online latched onto Emily's case. Reddit threads lit up with wild speculation. One theory connected her to a string of female joggers who had vanished across Northern California over the past 5 years, each from wooded areas, all within 20-mile radii of state parks. No clear link was ever confirmed, but the timing was unsettling. Another user claimed a satanic cult used the trail system for rituals, citing a decades-old urban legend about a woman's body found posed beneath a stone arch just 2 counties away. Police dismissed these ideas publicly, but internally, they weren't so quick to rule anything out. By late November, one name kept resurfacing in quiet tones: Daniel Pierce, a former vineyard worker with a long arrest record for trespassing and harassment. Daniel had been fired from a nearby estate just months before Emily vanished. A female sommelier had once filed a complaint that Daniel followed her home from work. No charges stuck, but his reputation lingered. Detectives attempted to question him, but learned he had died in a fiery car crash on a back road shortly after Emily's disappearance. His vehicle had veered off a ravine and exploded. No witnesses, no survivors. Some found the timing too coincidental. Others wondered if he had help, or if someone was making sure he stayed silent. By the fall of 2025, the case of Emily Hawthorne had all but faded from national headlines. In Napa Valley, however, her name still lingered like morning fog whispered in town meetings, brought up in passing at farmers' markets, and etched in the minds of those who remembered her face on missing posters that had long since been taken down. The forest trail where she vanished had reopened, though many locals quietly avoided it. Hikers spoke of strange sounds, soft crunching footsteps that never resolved into anything visible. A lingering presence, they'd say, but no one ever found anything. Until Bibi did. Claude Moreau had moved to Napa from southern France after retirement, bringing with him the 2 great passions of his life, food and truffle hunting. His prized truffle pig, Bibi, was a rotund and sharp-nosed creature, trained to sniff out the rare delicacies buried beneath the forest floor. On the morning of October 18, 2025, Claude took Bibi into a wooded section of private property near the edge of the reserve close to the trail system where Emily had disappeared. Though that wasn't his intention, he had no idea he was about to stumble onto something far darker than a gourmet ingredient. The morning was crisp, and the forest floor damp with early rain. BB trotted ahead, tail twitching, snout close to the moss-covered ground. Claude followed lazily behind, enjoying the stillness, until BB suddenly stopped cold. She let out a deep grunt and began frantically digging first with her snout, then her hooves, kicking up dirt and leaves with strange urgency. Claude assumed she'd found a particularly large truffle cluster. But as he stepped closer, a sharp, bitter smell hit his nostrils, not earthy, but sour, metallic. Wrong. He bent down, expecting fungi. What he saw instead made his blood freeze. Partially buried beneath the tangled roots of a twisted pine tree was a single shoe, a woman's running shoe. The turquoise color was faded but unmistakable, still laced, still intact. Claude backed away, heart pounding, and pulled BB away by her harness. Just a few inches from the shoe, a glint of silver poked through the dirt. He gently brushed it aside with a stick and uncovered a small fitness tracker caked in mud, but blinking faintly, as if it had just been turned on. Then came the final discovery. A clump of fabric, rotted and clinging to something pale underneath bone. Authorities cordoned off the area within the hour. Forensic teams arrived in vans, digging slowly, carefully. What they unearthed wasn't a full body, just fragments. A partial jawbone. A necklace with a delicate pendant still dangling from a corroded chain. But the most disturbing find was something no one expected. A dirt-encrusted GoPro camera, nestled between two flat stones. Its lens was cracked. Its memory card intact. The officials didn't say much to the press that day, only that the device would be analyzed by a specialized team. But behind closed doors, the question everyone was afraid to ask had finally returned. Had Emily Hawthorne recorded her own end? The crime scene, now officially reopened after nearly 2 years, became a hive of activity. Law enforcement, forensics, experts, and media helicopters descended on the dense woodland like vultures, circling a long-dead secret. Yellow tape fluttered between trees like warning ribbons. The earth was soft from recent rains, making excavations slow and methodical. With every layer peeled back from the forest floor, something new, something wrong was revealed. What began as a single shoe and fitness tracker was only the beginning. Within hours, they unearthed 3 more fragments of bone, one of which was confirmed to be a human femur, snapped clean at the center. The area where the remains were found was not a natural burial site. According to the forensic team, it had been disturbed and recovered at least once. The depth was shallow, just enough to hide, not enough to preserve. What disturbed investigators most was how carefully the site had been masked. Leaves had been placed deliberately. Moss had been packed in over the disturbed soil. Even the pine needles, thousands of them, had been spread across the top in a way that seemed staged. This wasn't an animal's doing. It was human. Someone had tried to hide her, but not from nature. From people. Near the remains, several smaller items were recovered, some almost overlooked. A rusted key, a torn scrap of fabric with a faint floral pattern, a cracked bracelet, warped from time but unmistakably hand-woven. Emily's sister later confirmed she had made it for her as a birthday gift the year she vanished. But it was the necklace that triggered the strongest reaction. A delicate chain, the kind you'd wear daily, with a silver pendant engraved with the initials EH. For her family, it was heartbreaking confirmation. For the investigators, it raised an unsettling new question. If someone had taken the time to bury her, why had they left so many identifiers with the body? Then came the GoPro. At first glance, it looked useless, mud-covered, one side shattered, buttons jammed. But the memory card inside was dry, perfectly sealed. Specialists transported it under guard to a digital forensics lab, where technicians worked through the night to recover its contents. They didn't release details to the public immediately, but whispers began to spread among officers, reporters, and eventually to the townspeople. There was a file, a single, damaged video clip timestamped October 4, 2023. 6:16 a.m. Less than 3 minutes before Emily's smartwatch registered its final heartbeat. Word got out that the footage was disjointed, chaotic, but chilling. Emily appears on screen, her breath visible in the morning air, running along a trail dappled with sunlight cutting through the trees. She looks calm, focused until something off-camera catches her attention. She stops, tilts her head, then says something low, barely audible. "What are you doing here?" Her tone isn't alarmed yet. The camera jerks, the view tumbles. Pine needles whip past the lens. There's a loud noise like feet pounding toward her. The screen distorts, freezes, and then, for a fraction of a second, A shadow crosses the frame, a person, an animal. No one could agree. But one thing was clear: Emily had seen something or someone just before everything went dark. The recovered GoPro footage became the centerpiece of the investigation, more than a clue, almost a confession. But it didn't come easily. The file was partially corrupted, degraded by time, moisture, and damage to the casing. It took forensic technicians nearly 2 days to reconstruct what little was left, using high-level software normally reserved for counter-terrorism and espionage work. What emerged was an incomplete video, barely 90 seconds long, but enough to send a ripple of dread through everyone who watched it. The raw footage was never made public. Only a handful of people ever saw it in full, and even they wished they hadn't. The video begins innocuously: Emily jogging, her breathing steady, the soft patter of shoes on dirt filling the audio. The trees are backlit by rising sunbeams, giving the trail a surreal, golden glow. She hums something under her breath, indistinct, like a song without lyrics. Her pace slows slightly. Then she turns her head sharply, eyes narrowing at something off-trail. The camera shifts with her gaze. She says just 4 words. "What are you doing here?" Her tone is not afraid, but confused, familiar, as if she recognized whoever or whatever was there. That detail alone caused the entire investigation to pivot. This wasn't a random attack. She knew them. Then chaos. The footage jolts. The screen spins sideways, showing a brief flash of tree trunks, before crashing into the ground. Pine needles smear the lens. The ambient noise cuts out, replaced by a low rhythmic thud, footsteps, a heartbeat. No one could say for sure. In the lower left corner, the timestamp glitches, skipping seconds erratically before freezing at 6 hours, 16 minutes, and 41 seconds. Then, in the middle of the static, a figure emerges, just a silhouette, all hunched slightly forward, wearing what appears to be a hood or dark jacket. The frame is distorted, making it difficult to determine the size or sex of the person. But what unsettled analysts most wasn't the figure's presence, it was that it seemed to pause and look directly into the lens. The screen goes black, but the audio continues. There's a gasp, a snap of twigs. And then, unmistakably, Emily's voice, high, panicked: "Stop, don't." Followed by a sharp intake of breath. No scream, no struggle, just that single moment of terror suspended in digital amber. The final audible sound is a soft mechanical beep, later identified as the GoPro shutting off. But here's where things grow colder. The internal clock didn't just stop, it froze on a time that investigators couldn't explain. 6 hours, 6 minutes, and 6 seconds. 3 sixes. Glitch or coincidence, or something more? When questioned, the forensic techs insisted the device's timestamp couldn't have reset like that on its own, not without being tampered with. The footage raised more questions than it answered. Why was Emily filming that day? She had never used the GoPro on her morning runs before. Why had she turned it on moments before she disappeared? And perhaps most importantly, who was the person she spoke to so calmly? Investigators tried running the figure through motion detection software and frame enhancement tools. But the image was too warped, the lens too damaged. A forensic psychologist brought in to analyze her tone said her voice indicated familiarity, not fear, at least at first. Which begged the question: did Emily go into those woods that morning to meet someone? As the video circulated privately within law enforcement and forensics circles, pressure mounted to close the case. Public interest had been reignited by the discovery in the woods. And Emily Hawthorne's name was back on headlines across California. The sheriff's department, under mounting scrutiny, began digging deeper into every old lead, every dismissed suspect, every overlooked report. That's when Daniel Pierce's name came back into focus, not because of new evidence, but because of an inconsistency that had gone unnoticed the first time around. His death in the car crash had been assumed accidental. But what if it wasn't? Daniel, a former vineyard worker with a history of stalking and breaking into rural properties, had lived less than 3 miles from where Emily vanished. He had no confirmed link to her, no shared employment, no overlapping social circles. But buried deep in his storage unit records was a forgotten piece of evidence, a digital camcorder, logged as part of his belongings and never retrieved after his death. It contained hours of footage mostly innocuous, except for one disturbing clip. Shaky zoomed-in video of a woman jogging along the trail. A woman who appeared to be Emily. The clip had no sound, no date stamp, but it was enough to push authorities to test DNA from the burial site against samples from Daniel's home. The match was partial but significant. Skin cells found on the interior band of Emily's fitness tracker aligned with Daniel's genetic profile. The sheriff's office announced to the public that a probable suspect had been identified and that the case, while tragic, was now considered closed. A press conference followed. Emily's family stood silently beside the officials as her photo flashed once again on the screen, this time not as a missing person, but as a confirmed homicide victim. Closure, they were told. But what wasn't told to the public was what the analysts found when they extracted metadata from the GoPro's internal log. The device had been turned off not by impact or battery loss, but manually. By someone who knew exactly where the power button was. Still, something didn't sit right. The figure in the video, the gait, the posture, even the build didn't match Daniel Pierce's known physical profile. He had walked with a slight limp due to a leg injury years prior. But the person captured briefly on the video moved smoothly, without hesitation. A motion analysis technician reviewing the footage quietly noted this in a report. But the case was already being wrapped up, officially filed away. Attempts to raise concerns were ignored. The department, after 2 years of open-ended speculation, finally had their answer. Or so it seemed. And yet, rumors began swirling again in town. A park ranger swore he saw someone standing at the old trailhead weeks after the announcement. Same hood, same stance. A teenage girl hiking with her dog claimed she heard humming deep in the woods, the same melody Emily's family said she used to sing during runs. And then there was the GoPro itself, returned to evidence, locked away. But according to one unnamed source inside the department, a second video file had been recovered, unlisted, unlabeled, only seconds long. The clip ends with the camera lying on the ground, and the shadow of a second figure stepping into frame. Emily Hawthorne's case may be officially closed, but if you ask the people who still walk those trails, they'll tell you something doesn't feel finished. A cold wind still moves through the trees in the early morning hours. Footsteps echo on empty paths where no one is seen. And that GoPro still, locked away in evidence, may hold more secrets than anyone is willing to admit. Sometimes, the forest doesn't forget. Sometimes, justice wears the mask of convenience, and sometimes, the most terrifying part of a mystery isn't what we know, it's what we almost found.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.